It's January 2nd, 2025, and Jeremiah Smith, I believe, just scored again. Welcome to the Hard Count. I just told you the date. Glad to have y'all here, man. A lot to unpack. Some college football playoff madness yesterday. Kind of felt like we got parent-trapped a little bit with the games. Totally thought that the way that Oregon-Ohio State went was going to be the way that Texas-Arizona State went, and then vice versa with the double overtime thriller out there in Atlanta. A lot to unpack. A lot to unpack. We'll give you our thoughts on Ohio State, touch on Oregon a little bit. If you're a Texas fan, how do you even feel after that one? Like, the spread was 13.5, and it came down to, double OT. You had a chance to win it in regulation. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. So I think if you're a Texas fan, you probably feel a lot of different ways this morning. We'll unpack it together. Do not worry. We're also going to take a very quick look ahead to Texas-Ohio State. Don't look now, but minus 5.5 favoring Ohio State. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Also, you got Georgia and Notre Dame today, and we will give you some final thoughts on that one. Glad to have y'all here. If you're new to the show, would love to have y'all a part of this. Best way to be a part of it is by being subscribed. We ask y'all to do that a lot. Full transparency just helps us do more of the content you want to see, helps us build the show, helps build the channel. So we appreciate you so much for that. Before we get rolling, we would be remiss if we didn't send our thoughts and prayers to everyone impacted by just the absolutely tragic events that transpired in New Orleans. No real way to put words to the horrific events that happened there. But again, we're with you on this side of things, and again, send our thoughts and prayers your way. Let's start here with what Ohio State did to Oregon in the Rose Bowl. All right, if you see Ohio State in the woods with a grizzly bear, help the bear. Is I think the main takeaway I have from what happened to that Rose Bowl, man, because this was always who Ohio State I think was supposed to be. But the fact that they're clicking now in the fashion that they are, this is now Ohio State's playoff. And Vegas has them as the favorite. That's, whatever you want to make of it. I'm just looking at this from a purely football perspective. This is like, who's beating Ohio State when they're playing at that level? The answer is nobody. And they took their lumps a little bit during the regular season. The Oregon game happened. The Michigan game happened. But, I'm looking at what they are right now overall, and they look like just a completely different outfit. And I think the question you ask yourself is what changed for Ohio State? Like, what changed when it comes to how they looked against Michigan and how they looked against Tennessee and Oregon the last couple of weeks? It's a funny way to put it, but I think the Michigan game, in a lot of ways, is what you point to as, the heartbreak story arc for Ohio State. And we said this yesterday in our game reaction, but, you guys all have those friends who go through a breakup and they have two different storylines in front of them. They can pick storyline one, where they just become a bum, they become soft mentally, soft physically, and they just pack it up. Or you have the other storyline where they just say, you know what, nope, that's not going to be how I go down. That's not going to be my future, if you will. So they respond and they say, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the gym. We're going to get after it. Going to transform the physical. We're going to stay late at work, all right? We're going to kill them with success, a little extra career juice there. We're going to operate with more of an edge here, just have a different pep in your step, different swagger. That was Ohio State post-Michigan, man. That truly is. You look at how they operated, and Ryan Day said this post-game, a lot of different players said this post-game, but legitimately, they are operating with a different level of what feels like urgency, different level of aggression, and I can't help but feel a little bit like the worst possible thing happening to Ohio State was that Michigan loss. After it happened, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it hurts. But in a lot of ways, there's nothing worse that can happen. Like losing to Tennessee at home in Columbus would have been bad, not worse than the Michigan game. Losing to Oregon in the Rose Bowl would have been bad, not worse than the Michigan game. So when the worst case scenario actually happens, it should remove quite a bit of fear. And when it removes the fear and you can just play in a lot of ways free, hey, nobody expects anything of us anyways after this Michigan game. A lot of people already packed it in on us. They're expecting us to fold. That, I think, created a new, like I said, sense of aggression from Ohio State. And we saw that with how they operated offensively. This is a brand new offense, man. And Will Howard is the best, I think, sample size to point to as to why it's so different. Will Howard went for over 300 yards one time during the regular season. It was the Oregon game. In this college football playoff, he has gone over 300 yards on two separate occasions. This is Chip Kelly now saying, okay, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to swing a big bat. We got Ferraris in the perimeter. And if we go down swinging, we go down swinging, but it's not going to be because we didn't try and target Jeremiah Smith. You watched that game yesterday. It was very, very clear early on in the scripted plays. They are trying to get number 4 the football. And Jeremiah Smith, seven receptions, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, we need to all understand what we're watching with him. We said it again in the game reaction yesterday. There are people that are dialed into college football to the nth degree from a talent evaluation standpoint to the have covered it for forever standpoint, and they're all telling us, hey, this dude has a chance to be the best receiver ever to play college football. This is not like your neighborhood take guy or your local radio guy just saying that, or maybe someone from the Ohio State side of things saying that. This is like your Joel Klatt, your Todd McShay's, people that are all the way dialed into this sport saying, yeah, he's a one of one. And that was said throughout the season, and you're hearing that, but then you're also watching the Ohio State game plan, and you're like, okay, why does he have 35 yards against Michigan? That doesn't feel like the right approach. I think Chip Kelly deserves a ton of credit for the way they've utilized him, the way they've been aggressive, the way they've pushed the ball downfield. And when Jeremiah Smith is now operating at this level, one, it just changes the entire complexion of the pass game. Like, Will Howard's job got a lot easier with trying to target Jeremiah Smith downfield when they dial it up for him. Emeka Egbuka's job a lot easier. And the run game now gets to really, I think, show their teeth, if you will. Like Trevion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, that's 2 RB1s, man. And they're starting anywhere in the country. And they've decided now to share the load together in Columbus, and they did it yesterday to the tune of darn near 200 yards. They probably could have gone over that if they had really wanted to. Credit Ryan Day, man. Give Ryan Day all the credit, because as much as he got dunked on post-Michigan, he needs to now receive the flowers the opposite direction. Because it would have been very easy for that locker room, for that staff, heck, for Ryan Day, like I just said, after Michigan to just kind of pack it up, say, woe is me, have the sympathy show, all that stuff. That wasn't this team, man. Definitely not against Tennessee, definitely not against Oregon. And so what I think that speaks to is the foundation of the culture at Ohio State. And that was something I think a lot of us questioned, especially after the Michigan game. Like, hey, why can't they get over the hump against this team now that is, just to call a spade here, not as talented as them? And again, the Michigan game is probably a catalyst, but I do think that when you look at trying to figure out who someone's culture is and what it looks like, you find out what the culture is after you get punched in the mouth. You find out what the culture is after you have your greatest public embarrassing failure, like losing to Michigan for the 4th time in a row. That's a squad that won 7 games this year, the Michigan Wolverines. It's also important to note here, Ryan Day being able to keep this team operating at a certain level of intensity, I think deserves to be rewarded as well in the public opinion, because it would have also, I think, been pretty easy if you're Ohio State to have the Michigan loss, come out firing against Tennessee and say, okay, we got something to prove. We're playing with some extra juice. We're playing a little bit more free, whatever. And then you beat Tennessee the way that you beat them. And everyone's telling you how great you are. Hey, Ohio State's this, Ohio State's that. This Ohio State team won a national championship. And then you go play Oregon, and you kind of have this exhale moment going into that game because you feel like, okay, we've kind of shown who we are a little bit. We can kind of rest a little bit more now that we've, kind of put all the negativity to rest to some extent. And then get beat by Oregon. Like, that was definitely a storyline that was out there into the multiverse. So, I didn't see that. I saw the same team post-Michigan as I saw post-Tennessee. And that, I think, speaks to how dialed in this Ohio State team is, how much of an edge they're playing with. That's dangerous, man. That is extremely, extremely dangerous. Oregon's a good football team. Like, I'm not sitting here today saying, man, we were all wrong about Oregon. No. Oregon beat this team last time in Eugene. Credit this staff, credit this team for continuing to take strides since that game. If you watched our pregame show yesterday, we said this. The evolution of both squads since that game was going to be obvious in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State very clearly took what happened against Michigan, took what happened in Eugene, took what happened really since October, and has continued to evolve, self-scout, and now is playing their best football at the right time. So again, like Ohio State, they're the favorite in Vegas. That's great. They are going to be, I think, in the national championship game. I would take them to win the national championship. That's not really a hot take, not really swinging a big bat too much, but this is real. This is the Ohio State team we were told about. This is the apex predator we were warned about. The scary thing now is they're in hunting mode. All right, like everyone sees those National Geographic clips of like the Lions kind of lounging with the big mane. They're just hanging out. That was Ohio State really for the better part of the regular season. And it bit them a couple times. Now Ohio State, having been bit, this line's angry, this line's hunting, this line's aggressive, and with how much firepower they have, how much talent they have, the best team on paper in college football, that team on paper is now translating to the grass. And it's a bad deal for the rest of college football. So I cannot wait to watch the Texas game. Again, quick preview for that a little bit later in the show. But this Ohio State team, the edge, the weapons, it's all clicking right now. It's all clicking right now, and that should be terrifying. That should be terrifying. I think that is terrifying if we're going to keep it a buck. Now, the other side of the Rose Bowl was Oregon and the way that they just – I don't want to say didn't show up because that feels like it's taking away from what Ohio State did. But I think if you're an Oregon fan today, maybe just a college football fan in general, you're like, wait a second. Wasn't that the team that was like the number one seed in America, won the Big Ten, hadn't lost a game? How did this happen? Why was there this implosion? And the feeling for me is like whenever you have such a just belt-to-behind situation like Ohio State displayed yesterday against Oregon, it's usually not just one thing. Like I think you can point to a couple different things and say some of this, some of that, kind of just a imperfect recipe for the circumstances they had. The thing that jumped out the most, though, was the way the defense seemingly, from what I can tell watching the broadcast copy, had Dillon Gabriel in a little bit of a blender. That's a quarterback playing a lot of football now. And so for Jim Knowles in that secondary to what seemed like take away the quick throws that he wanted to have, that totally put Oregon into a spot they just don't want to play, which is, okay, we got to play drop-back football. We have to maybe ad-lib a little bit more. We got to make our offensive line work a little more. Because we've said a lot on this show, like the Oregon offense is built to get the ball out of Dillon Gabriel's hands in like 2-ish seconds, 2.2 officially, but who's counting, and get the ball to a Tez Johnson, to an Evan Stewart, to whoever in space, let them work, let them make you miss, and have that be the way that you get down. When Ohio State was playing as locked down as they were on the back end, that gives Jack Sawyer, J.J. Tuimoloau some time to go get after Dillon Gabriel, and that's just never a good situation when you give those guys some permission to go rush the passer. So when you factor that in, you point to, I think, what happened early in the year for Oregon. Like that's kind of how it looked in my estimation. Everyone's talking about what's wrong with Oregon those first two games of the year. What was wrong with Oregon was whether it was the offensive line, whether it was Dillon Gabriel, they were not all the way synced up and able to get the ball out of Dillon Gabriel's hands quickly. And that's why they played so many close games early. So all Ohio State did, from my knowledge, again, watching the broadcast copy, essentially did the exact same thing that Oregon was forced to do early on. And the unfortunate part about that, if you're Oregon, is the talent level of an Ohio State is far superior to those teams you played early on in the year, where you're able to kind of find a way to collect yourself and get it together. Defensively, our producer here, Cato, he nailed this. Like the run defense was always a little bit, if you were to look a little bit more deeply at some of these games, maybe a cause for concern. The way that I feel about it is like the Step Brothers interview scene where they're interviewing in tuxedos, and after a certain series of events, the interviewer says, you know what, actually, the tuxedos are kind of messed up. After Oregon loses to Ohio State in the fashion they did and get run on the way they did, actually, I'm like, you know what, that Penn State game was a little bit messed up, where Nick Singleton and Katron Allen have their way. Actually, Purdue running for over 200 yards, scoring no points, but running for over 200 yards, that is a little messed up. And I think that's kind of what you look at with Oregon. But again, I don't think it's just one thing. It's that paired with the offense not being able to move the football, paired with the just, I think, overall looking like Ohio State is a monster right now. That's the one more thing I'll say here. If you're talking about collection of errors, there's one more thing I'll say here. I wonder if the 20-plus days of rest for Oregon wasn't actually as helpful as maybe it was pitched to be. Having a bye is great, but having to jump in cold and play the best roster in America, who's playing at a high level, who is all the way ramped up right now, and like they're operating at peak performance right now, for you to have no warm-up and jump into that, it's never a bad thing to get rest. And I don't think that Oregon had a bad game plan or wasn't prepped. I just don't think they were all the way ramped up. So is that game different if Oregon, doesn't get a bye and they catch them, later in the tournament? I don't know. But again, I think that was in some way, shape, or form a variable to keep an eye on. And quite frankly, man, Todd McShay nailed this. It's been something that's happened across this playoff. When you look at teams that have jumped on the other team that got a bye in that first round versus the team that played in the first round and kept the process, kept momentum, kept routine, and able to just kind of keep a good thing going. So I'll say this too for Oregon, man. They're not going anywhere. I know it's fun the day after and really during the game to say, man, Oregon was overrated. Dan Lanning's cooked. This team's no good. This roster's no good. It's like, let's all just breathe a little bit. they're still going to crush the portal. They are crushing the portal. They're still going to continue to recruit at the top 10 level. Oregon's not going anywhere. This is Dan Lanning's third year in Eugene. They're going to be just fine. They're going to be more than fine, I promise you. Give them some time. They're going to be okay. Unfortunate to draw Ohio State in the second round, just to say the quiet part out loud. If Oregon drew another team, hypothetically speaking, maybe it's different. But again, it is what it is. And Oregon will be, I have to believe, back in this situation at some point in time in the not-too-distant future. So let's talk Texas here in a second. Before we do that, though, I want to let y'all know the show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. If you've been following us on our plays, been eating good. Been eating very, very good, all I'll say. So, code HARDCOUNT, when you play a $5 lineup, $50 in promo funds. So let's just say our streak runs out. Hey, we go cold. Cool. It is what it is. You followed us. $5 lineup. You lose $5, but guess what? $50 in promo funds to go recoup that and go get after it a little bit. So we appreciate Prize Picks bringing you all the hard count today. And again, code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, $50 in promo funds. The other playoff game yesterday, and I said this, it felt like this was supposed to be the way that Oregon-Ohio State went, was the Peach Bowl with Texas and Arizona State and Atlanta. Texas finds a way to eke it out. In double overtime, there's a targeting call we'll talk about later in the show, or a non-targeting call we'll talk about later in the show. But if you're a Texas fan, you're happy you won, but you're also like, why'd it take double OT against a team that we were favored by 2 touchdowns against? Like, how am I supposed to feel today is, I think, the question I'd be asking if I'm a Texas fan. It's the classic, like, Alonzo Mourning gif or GIF, whatever, however you pronounce that word for yourself. Yeah, that's great we won, but it took 2 overtimes. Yeah, that's great we won, but we couldn't run the football. For me, like, there's plenty of reason to be upset today and to feel bad. Just what I said. I mean, you blew a lead. That's the first part of this. You couldn't run the football in a team that's prided itself on running the football, quite frankly. Really, let's say this. You probably should have lost that football game, if we're going to be real here. Played poorly enough to lose that football game, especially down the stretch. Did not look great up front in the trenches with Cam Scadaboo. Now, Scadaboo's a 101. All right, he's a gallon jug player of the year for us here on the hard count. Dude's a baller. I mean, he proved his worth yesterday, just so we're all on the same page. Still, having a guy run for over 100 yards on you and receive for darn near 100 yards on you, to have that kind of all-purpose numbers and then throw a touchdown, like, yeah, that doesn't inspire a ton of confidence in what you are going forward, playing 2 RB1s and Henderson and Judkins in the next round. Offense nowhere to be found, middle 2 quarters. So all those things, I listed all the bad. And if that's the way you want to view this thing as a Texas fan, completely understand. Completely understand. You kind of pile on there with the Ohio State situation, like, okay, you had a bad day at work, you go home, and then you remember, oh, shoot, I have a massive presentation due the next day. That massive presentation is Ohio State waiting for you in the next round. But this is my feel on the way that I would approach the Texas situation if I'm a Texas fan. I really think it's a choice with how you want to feel. Like with anything in life, there's usually a lot more options than you maybe perceive on the front end. If you're a Texas fan, yeah, you played bad for 3.5 quarters. Yeah, you didn't look great against a team that you were supposed to beat the brakes off of, but you won. You had a bad day, didn't play well, played poorly enough to lose, but you won. I think you look at Quinn Ewers, and he's kind of, to me, a little bit just complex to figure out because of how he's been so up and down this year. And you watch the Michigan game, you're like, this guy's a freaking first-round pick. And then you watch a lot of these other games, and you're like, I don't even know if we can, feel confident in our passing game when we get into a shootout with Ohio State. If you're upset with Quinn Ewers, I don't blame you because of the lack of timeliness or the lack of consistency maybe during the game. But just what I said a second ago, like, as much as he wasn't timely during the 4 quarters, in overtime, dude was super timely. Like 4th and 13, no other quarterback on your roster is making that throw for you. And this is not me dunking on Arch Manning at all. He's the future. He's going to be awesome. But here's how I feel, man. I think the window for the Arch Manning experience is kind of passed. Like, if you were going to go to Arch Manning to be your guy going forward here, that's kind of just a conversation we've had consistently on this show because of, the lack of, production, I suppose you could say, for Quinn Ewers going forward here for Texas. I think that we've kind of passed that window because if it was going to happen, it would have been against this team. It would have been before you played Ohio State. And I can already hear the comment section say, well, JD, they went to Tua Tagovailoa, did Nick Saban, in the national championship game for the second half. That's awesome. I mean, it worked out great for Alabama. Not really like a tremendous blueprint for success. And again, I'm a pro Arch Manning guy, but like no other quarterback, I believe, is checking out of what they checked out of or audible the way they audibled on 4th and 13 with your season on the line. You don't get a first down, you lose to win the football game to Matthew Golden, or to extend the football game to Matthew Golden. No one else is doing that. So yeah, is the Quinn Ewers experience kind of like driving sticks sometimes? Sure. Like you're humming for 1 second, the next you're stalled out. Totally feel that. But I really do feel like at the end of the day, you don't win that game without Quinn Ewers. And his stat line, the way that it looked versus the way that it felt, two very different things. But to throw for over 300 yards, account for 4 touchdowns, like Quinn Ewers is your guy. He's your guy. He's got the experience, got the battle scars. And I think long term in this college football playoff, like I don't see anyone else giving you a better chance at success. Now, the thing that's frustrating if you're a Texas fan here, kind of going in that glass half full, glass half empty situation, half empty is like, well, why are we so inconsistent? Hear that. Glass half full is like, well, we still find a way. The Texas traits, dude. The Texas traits just continue to show themselves. And the talent at Texas, I think, is good enough to compete with anybody. Now, do they have more talent than Ohio State? Ohio State's probably got the best roster in college football, so that's a tough discussion to have. But even with that being said, man, like when there's urgency behind this team, they look different. And when they're urgent, I think they're aggressive. When they're pushing the ball downfield, overtime, a great example. The shot downfield to Gunnar Helm. The shot to Matthew Golden, obviously, like we just said, to extend the game. When they have to have it towards the end of the game to get them in field goal range. Yeah, it sucks to miss the field goal, but I do think it's worth noting you were at least in position to hit that field goal. Like you set Bert Auburn up as well as you could, and I think that's a good kicker. You feel good about depending on him going forward. But like all that's to say, they're good when they're urgent. They're good when they're aggressive. They're going to have to be aggressive when they play Ohio State. Like, man, if you play the way you played in those, middle, really 3 quarters against Arizona State, against Ohio State, like, it's over. It's going to look a lot like that Rose Bowl did. Like, over before it really even gets rolling. There should be some urgency, is my point here. There should be some aggression. You should see what Oregon did the first time around against Ohio State and say, okay, you know what? Maybe we are equipped to do that. Maybe that's something that we can make happen. If you're not urgent against this Ohio State team, then, like, that's a whole other discussion. But I have to believe seeing what Ohio State did to Oregon will create some urgency. Being able to escape, to call a spade here, the end of your season against Arizona State in double overtime should create some urgency. If I'm a Texas fan, a lot of bad, a lot to be disappointed about, but I still think there is something to be said for having a bad day at the office, having a bad day overall, and still finding a way to get it done. Those traits for Texas, ultimately, I think, won that football game. The traits for Texas are something we're going to see, I think, a lot of these national title teams have going forward. Not calling my shot for Texas to win the national title, not doing that at all, but I do think that the resiliency, the grit, the just find a way to get it done kind of quality, that to me is why Texas won that football game, and that's what national title teams have. So let's get some headlines here in a second. Before we do that, though, I want to give some love to our friends over at Roback, man. I've told y'all many times, Roback to me during college football season, that is the go-to, right? Typically on a Friday during the season, I'll do like a little just State of the Union Q&A on my Instagram story. If you've tuned into that, I'm wearing a Roback hoodie. I'm wearing a Roback shirt. Wearing Roback joggers a lot of the time too. Best product on the market when it comes to where they are. The everyday short, the sweats I just mentioned, the joggers, the shirts, the polos, like everything you need as we jump right now into like a little bit more of a chilly season even. The hoodies are phenomenal. Roback got you covered. So use code JD on roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's RHOBACK.com, 20% off everything I just told you about. Joggers, shirts, polos, everything for first-time customers with code JD. No periods, just JD. Roback, man, great people over there, great product, football people as well, I want to make sure we mention. So someone else that's familiar with Roback's game is producer of the Hard Count, 2-time All-Sun Belt safety, vibe curator. That's Cato. Cato, what's up, baby? How we living, man?
We're living good, JD. We're in the middle of the postseason. Bowl season's coming to an end, which is sad, but the stakes of the playoff are going up and up. I think the cream's rising to the top, and we're seeing the best teams now. We've talked about it's 12 too many. There's 4 or 5 really good teams, 6 good teams left that are playing ball, so I'm pumped about it, man. I can't complain.
It's going to be a good one, man. It's gonna be good. What do we got here on the hard count headlines, my guy? What's the latest?
Yeah, this is a micro headline. It's something you referred to earlier. You referred to it on Twitter and definitely got a lot of attention. But we have to talk about the Texas targeting, man, just because I think it's such a trending, interesting topic. It's 3rd and 15, ASU 38-yard line, a minute left in the game, tied 24-24 in the Peach Bowl. Sam Levitt has the ball tipped at the line of scrimmage. It's caught for a 10-yard gain by Melquan Stovall before Michael Taft just delivers an absolute vicious blow to his head. It gets reviewed for targeting. It's not ruled a targeting. And, of course, per usual, there's a ton of dialogue that surrounded that about what should happen. You tweeted specifically, don't decide awesome games by targeting with a handshake emoji. You got a lot of flack there. I want you to defend those comments and maybe give your take on that call or no call in that game.
Yeah, man. So the kickback immediately was like, well, you don't want to – these penalties don't count in playoff games. But fourth quarter playoff game penalties – it's not what I'm saying. What we're saying here is that wasn't like some egregious targeting call. That wasn't some vicious take his helmet off. That wasn't some vicious like hit him with the top of your head, launch every fiber of your being into the guy. Like to me, I'm like, okay, unless it's just something that's totally malicious, dirty, bad, if we're actually questioning like, hey, was that a targeting call? Then I'm cool with us just saying, you know what? This has been an awesome game. We got two teams scrapping it out. Like let's let the actual play on the field dictate what happens here. Let's not have the ref show. So, like, again, I'm not advocating for anything against player safety. That's ridiculous. Again, Stovall ended up staying in the game. Looks like he was fine. Played the rest of the game, and they went to him actually on the last play of the game. So, to me, I'm just like, it's a very soft discussion to say that's why Arizona State lost. Like, Arizona State, even if they called that targeting, first of all, Arizona State's, like, not awesome from field goals. So, that's the first part. I think, like, 4 for 12 or something within 40 yards, 30-ish yards. Like, they're not great field goal kickers. The other part of this, we went to overtime. So, like, if that was the situation where, like, Texas gets the ball, Bert Auburn drills one, and time expires, okay, I hear the sentiment from Arizona State. You had 2 overtimes. You had Texas from 4th and 13. Like, it wasn't this situation where you didn't have other opportunities to win the football game. So that part irks me just a little bit. Last thing I'll say, the thing that I think is the most discouraging about this whole discussion is you got folks saying, man, SEC up to their old tricks. SEC just finding a way to rig it. And I'm like, man, this was an awesome game. Arizona State's a really freaking good team. Can we not have it be the SEC conspiracy theorists here? Can we just acknowledge that that was an awesome game? Refs made a call or a non-call, and, like, we live with it. Like, the other thing I hear, like, I was totally targeting. I can't believe we're just ignoring targeting. Ignore the rules. It's like the burden of proof actually seems to be on the folks that believe that was targeting because the refs that are in charge of calling that game said, hey, no targeting, play on. Let's go watch an 11-11 football game here. So that to me is like a little bit disappointing. It was a Big Ten crew. I'm not here for the whole SEC conspiracy stuff. Cato, you were a safety. Did you ever have a targeting call on you? Like, what's your take on this, man? I was curious to hear your thoughts.
0 career targetings for the boy. I never kept my head out of it, man. It's there's bang plays and it's hard, but it's something where if you kind of always do it, I always try to be a guy who hit with his face versus the crown or side of the helmet. Try not to be a guy that launched. So I avoided targetings as much as I could, avoided it nice. It's a lot easier said than done at the highest level with the speed of the game. And obviously with that tip pass too, if you're a Michael Taft, you're third down, sticks behind you, trying to run through that play as hard as you can, and all of a sudden the ball's tipped and you're getting there maybe a little bit earlier than you thought and you're just making a bang collision. I think the situation to me says more about just such a gray area that we have within targeting. Like the fact that I could see both sides of this shows that we really just don't know what targeting is. Like, I saw the play happen, wouldn't have been surprised if a targeting was called, and I see the anger that Arizona State has in that moment. On the flip side, Michael Taft did not lower his head too much. It was such a bang play. It didn't seem malicious at all. You know, he wasn't launching with the top of his head. So I see why it wasn't called either. So I think people watching at home like me wouldn't be surprised either way that call went, I think the more passionate response was from the fan bases from each side. So I just think that goes to show that targeting and some of these other rules, if you're watching NFL Sundays and these guys are landing on top of quarterbacks and they're calling it or not calling it, there's just such a gray area to me with this bang hits. And I think there needs to be more done there versus going to conspiracy corner, going wherever you can on the internet, arguing about what's right or wrong. I think the fact that it's an arguable thing says more about the targeting versus some of these other penalties we have that are a lot more subjective. When Michael Taft ripped off Scadaboo's helmet, no one was questioning that. That's black and white. We know what happens. And there's so many penalties that happen in the game, and mistakes and errors and just big-time plays that will go under the radar that decide the outcomes of the games. But, of course, ones like that where it's in the hands of the refs a little bit, those get a little bit more accentuated, and I see why the dialogue comes with that. But that's just being a viewer.
Cato, we've seen way more egregious hits not labeled targeting.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, Andrew Makuba decapitating Gunnar Stockton in the SEC title game. I was like, okay, if there is targeting, again, we seem to have a very loose definition of what that is, but like I saw Gunnar Stockton, peel all the way, like fold like a lawn chair. Looked like the lights went out for a second on my guy. He gets up, trots off the field. I'm like, yeah, maybe that's targeting. Again, I think they actually called that not targeting. So again, if that's not targeting and we're not having a big brouhaha about what that was and we're choosing to die on this hill, like that to me is tough to get behind. But I want to make sure I circle back to this too. Like there's like Twitter's going crazy too with other conspiracy theories about like, well, Arizona State had this penalty not called and this and that. And it's like, dude, I don't have an issue with that either. Like there was a questionable quote unquote targeting non-call from the interception where Isaiah Bond gets a shoulder to the head, and I'm like, dude, like it's football. Like again, I'm not here for saying that we shouldn't have the rule, period. But I am saying like I'm okay in that spot where like if it's iffy, let's not call it. Like I have no issue with the non-call with the Isaiah Bond situation either. I see folks on Twitter talking about Cam Scadaboo getting help from his lineman to get across the goal. It's like I don't have a problem with that either. It's a big-time football game. If it's in the gray area, let's let it slide. Let's let the actual 11-on-11 decide who's going to advance in the college football playoff. So I was encouraged to see that. Glad we got to that though. I obviously had a lot of thoughts pent up there, Cato, so I appreciate you bringing that to the headlines today, brother. What else we got?
For sure. We've talked about in the past how the playoff committee has a tough job because it's subjective. It's the same thing with these refs, and I think the bigger the stage is, the more you can take that magnifying glass and say, oh, this call went this way, this one went that way. So I don't expect this to be the end of that in the playoff just because the stakes are so big. I will say that. But, yeah, another headline here. We have some defensive coordinator firings to get to. Miami's firing Lance Guidry after 2 seasons, and Clemson parting ways with Wes Goodwin after 3 seasons. Miami, obviously, their Achilles heel this season was that defense, 42 points allowed in their last 2 games. And I feel like Clemson, not necessarily a bad defense, but maybe not up to the standard we were used to seeing when they were a powerhouse. What are your thoughts on these 2 firings? Maybe what do you want to see in there? What changes for those 2 programs as they look to bulk up some things on the defensive side of the ball in the ACC conference?
I'm glad you said that. I'm really glad you said that about Clemson, because the Clemson thing to me isn't so much like hey, this was a bad job, Wes Goodwin. It's more so like, hey, here at Clemson, especially when we're not going to the portal, for the most part now, Clemson kind of getting in the portal game a little bit. Love to see it. Like the margin for error here for us schematically, just overall from a coaching perspective, very, very low. Very, very low. And so we think about those Clemson teams that have won national championships behind Brent Venables calling the show. Like that is the calling card. Like, yeah, you got Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence kind of being a part of that equation, but like the defense, the Power Rangers up front, the talent overall, what they do from a defensive side of the football is what I think about when I think about Clemson and some of those historic runs they've had. So not necessarily like a just horrific job, but yeah, not meeting the standards. So I'm glad you said that. The Lance Guidry one's a lot easier to see coming, obviously, right? Like, Cato, if they had a defense that was serviceable, like forget top 20, forget like top of the ACC, just serviceable, they're in the playoff.
Easily.
Like Cam Ward's a national title caliber quarterback. Not saying a national title caliber team, national title quarterback, to where I think if he were to be dropped into the college football playoff today, whatever squad, like 1, he changes the line. That's the obvious part. 2, you probably feel like, okay, we at least have a chance. And that was the frustrating part for all of us, not seeing Miami find a way to get themselves in, not being left out, but not finding a way to get themselves in based on what they did on the field. I would have loved to see Cam Ward play somebody in the college football playoff. Would love to see what he could do in a 12-team scenario. So that makes a lot of sense. Tough to see, but yeah, I mean, Lance Guidry stuff is unfortunate, especially with all the talent they have on that side of the football. It felt like, at least, to not put it together. With the quarterback, man, just tough. Very, very tough.
Yeah, this is a Miami team that's ending the season as the top scoring offense and yards per game offense in the country. Like, when you look back, you're like, oh, if we could just get a little bit more from our defense, man, we have an absolute powerhouse. And I think when you talk about them, I think this might be a little bit of a conspiracy, but when you're talking about being the sweepstakes for the top quarterback in the transfer portal and a John Mateer, you think he's not worried about that defensive side of the ball? I mean, these quarterbacks, when you have guys like Michael Van Buren and Adante Moore going into situations knowing they're going to be a backup to sit and learn. I imagine some of these quarterbacks also have the wherewithal to not just look at the weapons they'd be throwing the ball to, but also looking, hey, Cam Ward's a guy who came from the same school I came from, went and had a historic season, one of the best we've seen in college football history, and they still fell short because of the defense. Why would I want to throw myself in that situation, asking myself to play to that level just to have the record they had this year, not even win the ACC and not make it to the playoff? So I think that's the thing that Miami's definitely going to have to take care of. And I think on the Clemson side of things, which is a kind of transitioning to another headline we have here coming up, if you can get a dominant side of the ball, I think in the ACC, just the way that conference is competitively, I think that's going to be huge and take them a long way. They obviously have Cade Klubnik coming back. So I think making that side of the ball, fine-tuning it and making it and taking it to another level could be huge for them. Brent Venables obviously built that house as far as the defense goes, and they had a lot of talent to go with it. Maybe the talent isn't quite there, but if you can maybe get a guy who can schematically up here get the most possible out of that defense, then we maybe see Clemson returning to the playoff game, maybe this time not as a 12 seed, but a team getting a first-round bye and being back as a national powerhouse. So definitely excited about that. You have anything else here? You want to move on to the next headline?
No, I think the next headline's great, man. I think Clemson is going to be a lot of fun to watch next year with some of the guys that are coming back.
Yeah, next headline here, we have some notable portal visits. When you talk about the wide receiver position, a lot of kids have obviously committed already, but there's a couple out there that are still lingering around trying to make a splash. And the two big ones, I think, are Zachariah Branch, who hit the portal out of USC. He's currently visiting Miami. And then you have a Squirrel White from Tennessee who also hit the portal visiting Florida State. These are two speedsters who can obviously really, really help an offense. What do you think about these two visits specifically? Maybe these teams or what other programs maybe should be interested in the talents of these guys?
Yeah, man, Squirrel White, tricky year for him. I know he was dinged up at times. The production obviously took quite a bit of a downtrend since what he did the year before with Joe Milton playing quarterback. I still think Squirrel White's really good, man. Like I don't question Squirrel White so much as I question like what went wrong with Tennessee. And sometimes one of those things where it's just like, hey, it just didn't work out. Like it's not on Tennessee, it's not on Squirrel White. It's just like, hey, it didn't work out. Zachariah Branch to me is the one that I'm tracking really closely because he's got some really big playability, man. And if you plug him into the right system, maybe it is a Tennessee. I know they're trying to get in the game with him at one point in time. Maybe it is a Miami. Like wherever he gets plugged in next. I know Georgia has been mentioned in regards to him. Not sure what the status is right now for all those different schools. But wherever you insert him into, he's a legitimate, like, hey, just get the ball to him in space and let him work. I don't know how you feel about him being like your wide receiver one with him in the slot. But I don't think it's irresponsible to assume that he could eventually evolve into that. And at the very least, like his floor is so high to where I just want him on my team and find a way to get him the football regardless. Because the whole USC thing was unfortunate how it didn't work out. I know USC fans feel some type of way about some of the receivers that left, saying, hey, we got Jacoby Lang, we're good. I hear you, but like Zachariah Branch, what he has proven he can be for you, given the right system, given the right amount of, implementation into the offense to his skill set, I'm excited to watch where he ends up. He's a game changer for me with wherever he lands at.
For sure. I mean, this is a guy who burst on the scene with a 99-yard touchdown kickoff return in one of his very first games, I believe, when he was at USC. So he's one of, like, quietly the most athletic, just raw talents we have in college football. I think with Squirrel White, obviously, there's some untapped potential there. I think my question to you is, when you look at both of these situations, I think it says a little bit about what's going on for these offenses. You have a Josh Heupel and a Lincoln Riley who are known for their offensive prowess. If you're a quarterback, a wide receiver, you'd imagine these are the places you want to be. You have people who've come before you, who've laid the groundwork as far as not only being successful, but taking your talents to the next level. Do you think this maybe says anything about the scheme, the culture, just offensively in general about a Tennessee and a USC, and that not just these two guys, but multiple other players from that position group have now departed and are looking to take their talent somewhere else?
Yeah, the Tennessee thing is intriguing to me because you and I were talking before the show, and it's like, hey, what Jalen Hyatt did winning the Biletnikoff, you call up his skill set with a speedster like a Squirrel White, and seeing what Squirrel White did in the Orange Bowl a couple of years ago against Clemson, you're like, okay, this should at least on paper be more of a fit than it ended up being. I wonder if like the Tennessee deal is more just like, hey, the offense it felt like all year trying to find its footing. And that's not saying the offense was bad, but it is saying like there were a lot of times where you're saying, hey, it's the offensive line not giving Nico time. It's Nico not hitting throws. It's receivers not getting open. And so for whatever reason, like they just couldn't totally catch the rhythm to the music offensively. And I don't think you pin it on any one person, but just like kind of what we said, like at some point in time, it's just best for us to mutually go our separate ways. And the thing with Squirrel White, too, with both these guys really is like we've seen Squirrel White at a really high level be a guy for you. Like we've seen what he can be in flashes. Very curious to see where he ends up at. Florida State would be obviously an intriguing fit in that Gus Malzahn offense. I'm not sure if that's a spot where you get like a ton more production behind what that offense is going to be, primarily a running the football situation. 60% run is who Gus Malzahn is offensively. So that fit is interesting to me. But at the end of the day, both these cats are I think, should be and are going to be highly sought after based on these visits we're seeing.
Yeah, definitely fascinating to see where these two guys land. I think these are guys who, smaller guys, typical slot receiver that can just take the top off if paired the right way with an offense for sure. I think last thing we're going to hit here, we have the quarterback decisions. Cade Klubnik announced his return to Clemson for 2025. A little bit less surprising there. Really excited for him, though, as he took a huge leap this year and can take another one next year. But I think a little bit more of a surprising one is Carson Beck declaring for the NFL draft. This is a guy who underwent surgery on his right elbow and is expected to return to throwing in the spring of 2025. Some people have chattered about this. I know Todd McShay said that he talked to someone a scout who wrote just a one-word answer to the decision, called it foolish. The typical On3 graphic team hit it with the foolish right at the bottom for his decision. What do you make of both of these decisions? You can go anywhere you want here. I think the Beck one obviously has a little bit more juice as far as being controversial compared to a Klubnik.
Yeah, dude. I mean, first of all, mentioning the On3 social team with that Todd McShay quote, I mean, just right over the plate, lob, fast. I mean, just out of the park, right? That was a layup. A lot of references there, different sports. But the Carson Beck thing, like you mentioned, it does have some juice just because, like, what is he if he comes back next year? And, like, how much better does Georgia get? Let's say they do go add one of these top portal guys and help him out a little bit more. I think it was Brooks Austin, who's a friend of the show, does tremendous work over on his own YouTube channel, so go check it out. I believe it's some crazy number, like 7% is the completion percentage that Carson Beck's statistics were impacted by drops. Like, that's a tough thing to look at. I also wonder how much the NFL is going to embrace Carson Beck given this most recent sample size. But you also factor in, like, a year ago, I mean, going into SEC Media Days, we're all like, hey, Carson Beck's QB1. I don't know who's QB2. You know, that was kind of how I felt, at least, going into it. Like, you had a Quinn Ewers discussion, a Shedeur Sanders discussion. Obviously, we feel very differently today than we did during SEC Media Days. But, yeah, I mean, to make that pivot out of a spot where you would have to imagine returning to Georgia can only help yourself. Like, I don't know where he's being mocked at right now. Also, financially, you have to think, like, you probably don't take a massive, massive pay cut from where he'd be drafted to what he could maybe get if he came back to college. So there's a lot there with the Carson Beck situation. The Cade Klubnik thing, speaking of the NFL draft, is he QB1 in next year's draft? Like, I mean, I don't know exactly everyone who we're going to have in that discussion, but as of guys that we know for a fact will be in that future draft, like, Cade Klubnik's probably one of those guys that you would put at least in that top 3 discussion, right? So there's that part of it for him individually. But, man, the stride Clemson caught towards the end of the year, even the Texas game, dude, I left impressed by that. Like, seeing T.J. Moore and Bryant Wesco be able to hit the scene as freshmen and be high-impact guys for them, and Cade Klubnik kind of put it together and progress. I mean, ton of kudos to Garrett Riley for getting that all working. Clemson's got to be the favorite in the ACC as of right now, right? I mean, I know we're sitting here and it's January 2nd, but, like, if I'm picking the ACC champ today, I'll take Garrett Riley in Clemson and then potentially an improved defense. Like, that to me is a really, really impactful guy to return. Not super surprising, like you said, but the way he's trended at Clemson and the way his weapons around him, I think, will trend. That's going to be a fun Clemson team next year, man.
No, they're definitely going to be fun, and I think these two decisions are just polar opposites. The Cade one, like we said, is a little bit more predictable. Love the steps he took this year. Love what he was able to do with an offense with weapons that were all very young and coming back next year, so that's super exciting. But for Carson Beck, man, I think everything just points towards coming back. I mean, the UCL injury alone, this man's going to be back in the spring. Like, this man's going to be rehabbing throughout his pro day, throughout the NFL draft, the combine process. Just seems like from that standpoint, that was alone was a reason to come back. Then you look at the season he just had, and he took a step back there. 28 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Like, he did not have the year he had the year before. It was clear that those weapons and the Bowers and the McConkey not being there did not help him. The drops obviously didn't help him. But I think even him going to the portal and testing his luck somewhere else would have been something that would have been more beneficial for this guy. So interesting decision for sure. We wish Carson the best, obviously, but I think it's one where his draft stock was already sliding as a non-injured player. You double it down with him being injured, not getting UCL surgery, same thing that happened to Brock Purdy last year. Like, just doesn't seem like a great scenario. I'll be curious to see where he gets drafted. And you're right, next year's draft will definitely be interesting too, with a guy like Drew Aller being in the mix as well. So
yeah, okay, I forgot about him. Yeah, Drew
it'll
Aller.
be interesting. I think that next year when the Arch Mannings and the Raiolas and the Lagways and the Lenorses can come out will be a really interesting year. But these next 2 years, I think it's going to definitely be interesting to see. Even now with the talk about Milroe and Quinn Ewers, I think there's still the dust hasn't settled. I think as far as what the quarterback landscape is going to look like going into next season. So I'm super dialed in on that for sure.
I'm really intrigued by what you just said with like the Carson Beck, the Quinn Ewers talk. Andy Staples has an article out about Jalen Milroe, NFLer portal. If one of those dudes were to hit the portal, I don't pretend to know exactly what their appeal would be, but I have to project a little bit and say like, okay, if I'm Miami, I need a quarterback. Like, I don't think you can maybe get a pretty good chunk of change. Like we're hearing rumors. Pete Nakos has an article, I believe, out about like the tampering potential, not from Miami specifically, I'm saying. Just in general, there's teams tampering, trying to get Quinn Ewers for a number of like $6 million. I'm like, dude, $6 million? I'll never leave college. I get to play college quarterback and be the man on campus and make $6 million. Like, dude, I am good. I am good with that. So, yeah, the plot thickens. The plot thickens around some of these guys. But, yeah, good call on the Drew Aller thing, man. He's definitely QB1.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be an interesting crossroads moving forward, because what Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, and Jalen Milroe all kind of have in common is that these were guys that were projected coming into this season a little bit higher. Maybe their draft stock took a little bit hit throughout the season, and all of a sudden they have a decision to make as far as declaring for the NFL draft, staying for one more year at my school, or testing my luck somewhere else. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch that this year and just in the future moving forward, as far as testing your market value, seeing in this NIL landscape what you can get from your own school versus another, and how that matches up with your NFL stock. So I think at the end of the day, it's just going to make all the ball better, right? We're going to have more ballers, more hoopers playing at the college level. One mini headline I wanted to hit before we get out of here. Had to shout out Delaware State new head coach DeSean Jackson. We talked last time about Mike Vick taking that job at Norfolk State, how maybe we might see a trend of these college head coach the programs for these head coaches are coming to maybe getting some players that have some juice to their name. Just wanted to tab that one, put it to the side a little bit, but just know we called our shot here early on the hard count that Tim Tebow would be the head coach of Florida eventually. Johnny Manziel will return to A&M. Whatever it looks like, we will get celebrity pretty much head coaches, former players. Just wanted to shout out DeSean Jackson and congratulate the guy.
Dude, that's the thing. Like, this is so awesome to have all these names like in the college football sphere, from Michael Vick to DeSean Jackson. I mean, even Trent Dilfer. I mean, I know he's at UAB and things haven't been incredible, but like I'm here for that. I'm here for that. The thing that's interesting to me too about DeSean Jackson, Michael Vick, in a bizarre way, I'm almost as intrigued to what like the next job could be for those guys. Like Mike Vick, head coach in Blacksburg for his alma mater, Virginia Tech Hokies, or like DeSean Jackson return to Berkeley. I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. I know we're hypotheticaling it up right now, but I think that to me is where this thing gets really, really intriguing, and could fall right in line with your theory there, Cato, of like big names, first team all living room. Like that moves needle when it comes to acquiring talent, and that's the name of the game right now in college football.
It'll keep moving the needle with us for sure. If you're a Bill Belichick, a Deion Sanders, ooh. I mean, we have guys on guys now that just have a ton of hype. Ton of reasons why we should dial in on them. And yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves, yes, but that's how you stay ahead of things. That's how you call your shot. So we're happy for DeSean. We're happy for all these coaches getting after it, returning to the game that they love, and we'll see how it works out for these guys. But great hard count headlines, my guy.
Hey, stay ahead. You don't got to get ahead. No, that's great work by you, brother. Stay ahead. You don't have to get ahead. Hey, one more thing here. I saw the line yesterday, or the over-under win total for Bill Belichick preseason at UNC. What would you guess that is right now?
We did look at the schedule the other day, so I'm trying to think back on it a little bit. I would say 6.5.
Okay. That's really, it was 7.5. So that was really close.
Close. I know, but bowl eligibility.
Cato's a sharp man.
I know a thing or two. Bowl eligibility is definitely something that Bill's got to get done in that first season. But we'll talk about in the offseason a little bit more about what we think the outfit's going to look like over there, because I think it's one of the most intriguing offseason topics we'll have here.
I'll take the under. I will take the under, but that's just me. That's just me. Again, Cato on the hard count headlines, best in the business. Appreciate him queuing those up, man, and just talking some ball. A lot of fun to do that. I've really enjoyed that with y'all. Really enjoyed being able to just riff on some other topics that maybe aren't like full-length 8-minute talking segments for us, but just good to touch on and good to keep a pulse across the college football landscape. Now, speaking of the college football landscape, we got Georgia, Notre Dame today in the Sugar Bowl. I want us to unpack some of these final thoughts as it pertains to this game, because we've watched this playoff play out now for the better part of the last couple of weeks. And I think we've started to see a couple of different storylines start to peek at what these games could be. And maybe what does it tell us going forward into this game? Like, the thing that jumps out first is, like, the teams off of rest have not had as much success as I think maybe they were projected to have. Like, that rest hasn't really been the deciding factor for them having success. Actually, the opposite. Like, they've all actually fallen to some pretty big deficits to start. Penn State jumps out on Boise State. You got Texas jumping out on Arizona State. You got, what was the other game that we had there I'm thinking of? You have Ohio State jumping out on Oregon. So, like, all that's to say, I'm curious a little bit here. Notre Dame, remember, they played in the first round, took care of Indiana. Georgia now had over 20 days to try and prep and get ready. I will say this, I do think the rest for Georgia is probably more of an advantage than it is for anybody else in college football that had to, have a couple of days off before this whole deal, a couple being 20 plus. Reason why I feel that way, one, it gives Kirby and this team a chance to really prep, and you give that staff time to prep, I think they're going to have a lot of success. I mean, that's like a mad scientist in the lab for 24 days, probably a good thing for him. I'll also say building out the offense around a new quarterback, to have 3 weeks to do that is huge. Absolutely huge. I mean, imagine you threw Georgia into that first-round game. Not saying they wouldn't have success against whoever they played, but to give Gunnar Stockton, like, what was it, less than 2 weeks to get ready versus having 3+ weeks to get ready, I think that allows Mike Bobo to probably call this offense a little bit more multifaceted as opposed to trying to, like, just protect him overall. The line of scrimmage mismatch, though, that I think we all perceived for some of these other games hasn't really been exactly the case. Like, the Boise State run defense is one thing, but overall, man, like, Boise State up front moved the ball with Ashton Genty on the ground against Penn State. You got Cam Scadaboo. First half took some time, but they ran the football against Texas. So all that's to say, like, yes, I still think the line of scrimmage advantage would favor Georgia, but I don't think Notre Dame's walking out there and being slappy by any stretch of the imagination. Like, if you were to perceive an advantage here for Georgia, Notre Dame is really not that much of a deficit. So I'm curious to see how that plays out in this game. I think it's worth noting. Last thing that's worth noting here when it comes to, like, the trends going into this game before we get to kind of the game deciders. There's no real correct way to say this, so we'll just kind of say it out loud. The SEC has been disappointing. SEC has not been all that. Now, I think it's more team-specific than it is conference-specific, just as my 2 cents on the whole deal. Like, Alabama, probably not that great when we look at what they were this year. Like, yeah, the bowl game is the bowl game, and you can try and convince yourself any way you want to of the variables that went into that bowl game, how much they, wanted to be there and all that. Like, that's a whole other discussion. But I really do think that at the end of the day, like, I don't feel different about South Carolina because they lost to Illinois. I don't feel different about Oklahoma because they lost to Navy. Like, I thought Oklahoma was going to be 6-6 before the year, and they played like it the entire year, and they played like it against Navy. So all that's to say now, just something to think about, because the social media world will be on fire if Notre Dame does take down Georgia. It'll be on fire because of Notre Dame beating Georgia, but it'll be even more on fire because of what people are saying right now about the SEC. So we touched on this a little bit yesterday as well, but what's deciding the game for me is still Notre Dame's skill, man. It still is about, can you have some pop on that side of the football? Can Jordan Faison do what he did against Indiana? Can you get Jaden Greathouse loose? Can you force feed Jeremiah Love? Because if you're not able to be dynamic and multidimensional against Georgia, that's a losing game. So right in line with that, man, like, I think Mike Denbrock has got to find a way to make Riley Leonard's job just easier, which is easy to say, tougher to do. But what I mean by that is, like, can we give him answers pre-snap? Can we know, hey, without a shadow of a doubt, hey, Riley, if things go to the dogs, pun intended, you got this check down. We got this answer. We got this hot route. Can you draw that up? Can you scheme that up against a Kirby Smart defense? I think you're going to have to. In addition to that, I personally would get Riley Leonard on the move. Like, I would have him rolled out quite a bit. I would make sure that we are not just sitting back there in the pocket, because as much as I trust Notre Dame's line of scrimmage, the Texas game, both of them live rent-free in my head with what Georgia did up front against them, and that's a good Texas O-line. So Riley Leonard is a great athlete. Let's utilize that. Let's get him on the perimeter. Let's put Georgia in chase mode. It's a lot easier to live that way than having to ask Riley Leonard to, like, ad-lib during the play. I don't love a reactive Riley Leonard against this Georgia front seven. Again, I wouldn't be massively, overwhelmingly surprised if he was able to make some plays off schedule like that, but I like a lot more, get him out in space, get him on the perimeter, give him some flood concepts, some easy things to look at, and, like, let's go ahead and ball that way. The element of surprise with Gunnar Stockton here is really intriguing, because Marcus Freeman said and again, we'll see how true this is, but he said he expects the Georgia offense to be very similar to what they've seen on film. I'm paraphrasing there. That was kind of what he alluded to. Gunnar Stockton is a very different player from what I can gauge than a Garson Beck. Not saying that Gunnar Stockton can't still push the football downfield, but like the element of surprise we all know with Gunnar Stockton is the fact that he may take off with his legs, whether it be on or off script, and you got to find a way to combat that. So how much they go to like the design quarterback run with Gunnar Stockton will be really, really intriguing. The other side of that is like how much do you want to run Gunnar Stockton if you're Mike Bobo? Because then you're going to the quarterback after Gunnar Stockton, which would be Jaden Rashada. So like, not saying Jaden Rashada can't help you, but like going to your third string quarterback in the college football playoff because you ran Gunnar Stockton one too many times, probably not the way to live. But I do wonder how much Mike Bobo gets in the bag, tries to mix it up, and throws Notre Dame off schedule a little bit. I say that, but also make this point. Do not disrespect the Notre Dame defense. Don't do it. Now, it's very clear. I took them in my playoff unit draft, so do I have some bias here towards Notre Dame defense? Absolutely. It also, though, is worth noting they are number 2 in America when it comes to points allowed, less than 14 a game. Now, have they played the Ohio States of the world and the Oregons of the world and the fill in whatever top offense you want to, the Ole Misses of the world every week? No. But still, less than 2 touchdowns, it's nothing to sneeze at. Nothing to just glance over and look past. So I say that, and then I also add they're very, very plucky. Very, very good at creating turnovers. And that could be how this thing gets wacky for both sides. Like, if Notre Dame's able to do what they do when Xavier Watts is balling and they got a pick early in the game and then you force a fumble, like, that would breathe life into this Notre Dame squad that, again, majors in that. They're right around, I think, creating 2 takeaways a game. But just as important as it would be to, jumpstart Notre Dame's sideline and what they do offensively, it would also, you have to believe, impact in some way, shape, or form the psyche of a Gunnar Stockton. Now, I think Gunnar Stockton's a dude. I think that he's, from what I can tell, watching him get his block knocked off in the SEC title game, a little bit built different. But still, man, in your first start, to have a couple of turnovers, like, you have to imagine that at worst, maybe shakes his confidence a little bit. At best, maybe limits the playbook for Mike Bobo. So that could be the thing that kind of turns this whole thing on its side. On the other side of that, though, the exact opposite is true when it comes to Georgia. Like, if they're able to create some turnovers, this could get very, very ugly. Because if they get a short field, just what we said about Gunnar Stockton and his confidence potentially being impacted negatively, give him a short field, get the ball inside the 40, inside the 30. He gets to kind of, see the end zone, sniff it a little bit. Maybe he throws a touchdown. Maybe he just leads a scoring drive. Any way you boost his confidence, advantage Georgia. Any way you give him more opportunity for success by putting him closer to the end zone, advantage Georgia. And so that's the obvious part. Like, obviously, scoring points is a good deal in college football, period. But when you talk about Notre Dame, what that would force them to do, I don't love Notre Dame playing from behind. I don't. If they go down 14-0, not saying they can't overcome that, but it's outside of their strike zone. It's outside of the bag for Notre Dame with how they want to operate. They want to throw the football, they want to run to throw the football. They want to be complimentary. They want to set up their shots downfield. They don't want to walk out cold and go 4 verts and say, all right, let's go get after it and air it out. It's not who they are. So, with that being said, this is going to be an awesome game. I cannot wait for it. But as we move into, 4 hours away from the game kicking off, those are our final thoughts as it pertains to the Sugar Bowl. And the winner of this, lining up with Penn State, man, we will have some thoughts on that as well once that thing wraps up. But should be a lot of fun, be a great matchup. And I'm excited to see the quarterbacks in that one. Really excited to see the quarterbacks in that one. So speaking of quarterbacks, we're going to have an awesome quarterback duel here, or we should at least, in Ohio State and Texas. Quinn Ewers very quietly going for over 300 yards against Arizona State. Now, it was a surge to get to over 300 yards with, the fourth quarter and overtime and all that. But, this is going to be an awesome matchup. Ohio State currently favored by 5.5. Let's have an early look at this matchup, man. Let's just kind of talk through some of these matchups we want to see within this matchup. Before we get to that, though, make sure you're subscribed. If you're watching live, thank you. If you're watching as a one-off video, also thank you. It helps us do more of what you want to see. And it just is a great deal for all of us to get more data from you, what you want to see. Best way to do that, by being subscribed. The matchup that I can't help but think about first is the Jim Knowles versus Quinn Ewers back and forth. Because Jim Knowles had a very experienced quarterback, a very talented quarterback, in Dylan Gabriel. Played 6 years of college football in a blender. Had him in a blender. Now, again, I'm watching the broadcast copy, so I can't see everything that's happening in the secondary. But in some way, shape, or form, whether it was Ohio State just locking up on the back end against Oregon, or whether it was Jim Knowles being the mad scientist that he is and cooking up some tough pictures for Dylan Gabriel, they had them really reeling a little bit here. And when you have a quarterback reeling, it means he has to try and find a way to buy time. When he has to buy time against this Ohio State defense, usually they're going to get home. So the thing with that is, like, Dylan Gabriel, man, he's a mobile cat. He can hurt you with his legs. He can make something happen off script. Quinn Ewers, not really his bag. Like, he can move and shake a little bit, but much less than Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel was sacked, 8 times in the Rose Bowl? So if Ohio State gets to hunt because Quinn Ewers isn't seeing it, that would be the way this thing gets a little bit wacky. But on the other side of things now, I think it's important to note, Texas got some firepower offensively. Like, Matthew Golden, he can go a little bit. So have we seen it as much as you would like to see it if you're a Texas fan as of late? No. But I don't think it doesn't mean it's there. Like Silas Bolden, we've seen what he can be. Ryan Wingo, a little bit quiet in the Peach Bowl, but we've seen what he can be. So I think there is still some opportunity here for Texas if they're able to have the right game plan from Steve Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers is able to see and diagnose this Ohio State defense. They're going to have a chance to take them vertical. And that's the way that Ohio State has been beaten against Oregon. So with that being out there on tape, I know it was October, but that's a matchup I cannot wait to watch. How much can Jim Knowles kind of cloak the defense versus Quinn Ewers seeing through it and having let's call a spade here, a legacy kind of game for our guy out there in Austin, Texas. Now, I'm really curious, too, when it comes to how this thing's going to go, handling the previous game for both sides. We talked about Ohio State and how well they handled losing to Michigan, responding by beating Tennessee, and then responding well to that success by beating Oregon in dominant fashion. Feels a little bit like if you're Ohio State, you're kind of back at where you were in the preseason. Everyone telling you how good you are, how you're the national title favorite, how this roster's so talented, how you're going to roll your way to a national championship. And, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for Ohio State, but I do wonder a little bit, are you able to still keep that same hunger? Now, my feeling on that is they will. My feeling is that Ryan Day has this team in just fight or flight mode in the right way with a certain amount of edge and confidence. But if you fall asleep at the wheel at all, Texas has the weapons to do something, right? So I'm not telling you that they're the more talented team necessarily. I think they have the talent, though, to get after you a little bit. Like Quinn Ewers still has it under the hood. We haven't seen as much as you want to, but if you fall asleep at the wheel, they can hurt you, can absolutely hurt you. Now, for Texas, they limped out of that Arizona State game, right? Let up a big lead, goes to double OT. I said it before on this show, probably should have lost the game if we're just going to be honest with ourselves. How much does what Ohio State got post-Michigan maybe translate for Texas post-Arizona State? You looked your mortality in the face on 4th and 13 and found a way to get it done. Do you exhale and say, okay, phenomenal, we beat Arizona State, we're good? Nick Saban says it on game day a lot, the worst thing that can happen is you play poorly and still win a football game for your football team when it comes to trying to get them dialed in the next week. If Texas can kind of flip the script a little bit and have that urgency we talk about, Texas is really good when they're urgent. When they're aggressive, when they're pushing the ball downfield, that's the Texas team that would scare me from Ohio State. So, if Texas has the exhale, though, this thing is going to be very, very difficult to watch if you're a Texas fan. So, excited to watch that one. Last matchup here, man. We can't go through an Ohio State-Texas segment without talking a little NFL and NFL here on the perimeter. Jahdae Barron, Jim Thorpe Award winner versus Jeremiah Smith. Now, I don't know if Jahdae Barron is going to follow Jeremiah Smith necessarily. I also don't think Jeremiah Smith will line up just one place. But that back and forth is going to be awesome to see. We saw it in the Rose Bowl, man. Jeremiah Smith putting up Randy Moss meme kind of numbers. Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State can be like the yeah, but, if you will. Texas jumps out to an early lead. Texas running the football. Yeah, but Jeremiah Smith erases that in 2 plays. Well, Texas, they're having a great day offensively. Sark in his bag. Yeah, but Jeremiah Smith is just a guy that you can't give one-on-one coverage to. You do that too frequently, he's going to make you pay. Generational gets overused in this industry, 110%. Jeremiah Smith is generational. Make that very, very clear. So how much for your Ohio State are you able to maximize that matchup? I think the other question is if you are another receiver, hint, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, how much are you able to maybe win your own matchup if extra attention goes to Jeremiah Smith? Because we watched Texas against Clemson and get taken to school, right? Not on Jahdae Barron, but the other corners in Malik Muhammad and others alike. They got after him, did Clemson. Now, Clemson lost the football game, but it was very obvious. They found something they liked with their matchup against those Texas DBs, not named Jahdae Barron, and they made them pay. So we'll see how that translates. The Texas defensive line has got to find a way in this game. Has got to find a way. Got to find a way, because that's the one part of this game where I'm a little bit curious as to which side that matchup favors. Right now, I think it favors Texas. If you're talking trenches, Ohio State offensive line versus Texas defensive line. And that's not really a commentary on the run game, because I still think Ohio State with those running backs will find a way to move the football on the ground. I'm talking like, speaking to the Jeremiah Smith, Jahdae Barron conversation, can you speed up the shot clock on Will Howard? Now, Will Howard's played great these last 2 weeks. We've also seen him during this season when he gets some pressure, gets someone in his lap. There's been some less than ideal decisions. So Colin Simmons, let's hit the Normatec boots, the hyperbaric chamber, the cold tub, all that. Let's get ready to rush the passer, baby. Now, you're a true freshman. I get it. We need you. We need you from Texas. Anthony Hill, same deal. Like, we need to apply pressure to Will Howard if we want a chance to win this football game. If you allow them to sit back there and play 7-on-7, it will be a very bad deal. You can force some turnovers, get some momentum. Quinn Ewers gets going, and maybe he's playing like Tuscaloosa, Ann Arbor, Quinn. Things get interesting. So that spread's 5.5. Curious to see if that moves either direction as we move forward here, but that's going to be an awesome, awesome matchup. And I cannot wait for it. A lot of just talent on talent across the board here. So it should be a really, really good game. And I can't wait to watch it. So before we get out of here, man, thanks for everyone tuned in live, man. It's been awesome to talk some ball with y'all. We got the Sugar Bowl right around the corner. If you are either a Georgia fan or a Notre Dame fan or an Ohio State fan, a Texas fan, any fan of a team that made the college football playoff this year, got good news. Axia Time has got you covered. They got us covered right now with bringing y'all the hard count today. Axia Time is probably the best kept secret in college football. An incredible combination of product, quality, and cool designs. No one is doing this in the college space. For the college football playoff now, this is what I mean when I told you they got you covered. Axia has created a series of limited edition pieces for each of the 12 teams in the college football playoff. 2 designs per team and only 100 watches per design. So go to AxiaTime.com to check out your team's college football playoff timepiece, but you need to act fast because they're going to sell out. If you're not a watch person, do your homework. You'd figure out this is a great deal when it comes to watches. Check them out at AxiaTime.com. That is AXIATime.com. Commemorate this season in style with a watch that tells so much more than time. So appreciate the folks over at Axia. Also brought some juice here for the Heisman Trophy. If you want to check out their Heisman Trophy watch. Not sure if that's up for purchase, but I do know that it's a sweet-looking watch. And, again, college football people sponsoring a college football show with a phenomenal college football-centric product. We're here for it. We're all the way here for it. We're all the way here for it. We're all the way here for y'all, man. We appreciate the heck out of y'all making this show what it is. We got a home stretch here, man. Count down the days. We got, including today, 18 days, give or take, till the college football national championship in Atlanta. We'll be there. Let's make it count. All right, so let's lock in. Let's have a tremendous Sugar Bowl. We appreciate y'all again so much. For Cato on the ones and twos, for myself, JD PicKell, we're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all.